a few minutes ago I did a video on dealing with unresolved past, right? A disturbance arises within, and then talking about kind of the skillful approach to dealing with it. I want to try to kind of zoom out and provide some additional perspective on this, and the goal is to explain why gratitude is both a wise and rational response to the arising of a disturbance within. And for this, I'll go into kind of call it a meta-cosmology, or kind of a spiritual philosophy that I've been developing to help kind of make sense of it all. And, it borrows pretty heavily from Hinduism, although I'm by no means a scholar on that to any extent, and just on a number of different theories and concepts that have kind of been coalescing for me over time. So the general framework is, and I'm using kind of a sub-part of it here, you can think of kind of a capital I, letter I, and a lowercase I. Capital I representing what I'll call the higher self, or the spirit self. This is the self that is not killed in a mortal death, right? So I'm driving a car right now. If it were to crash, my body would die, and whatever parts of my perspective, which I'll call lowercase I, that are identified with or inextricably tied to mortal being will perish when I die. Now, different video, I'll kind of talk about how nothing's ever actually lost, but just for the sake of discussion, let's take that as kind of the framework. Whereas the uppercase I is the spirit self that essentially feeds into incarnation, right? Is at a remove from physicality, is not material, has a form, but is a more of a spiritual divine form, and then incarnates into the lowercase I. And in my sense of things, the uppercase I is a singular being that will then manifest in a series of lowercase i's in time and space in order to have the experience of a mortal lifetime. Okay, so one of the questions, if you're going along with me on this, one of the questions is, well, why would the spirit do this, right? Why would the spirit incarnate? Why would it subject itself to, to borrow from the Hamlet, right? The slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, if I got that right. Why would it put itself through the inherent miseries and difficulties that are attendant to being alive, right? Fear, anguish, deep boredom, all those things. And I don't have the answer to that question, and the theory I'm going to propose, by no means do I think that this is the one answer. This is just one kind of scoop at it that I have. And it's essentially that, picture this spirit self, this uppercase I, being like a string or a filament, right? You can use like fishing line as an example for this. And, again, I'm taking a very small part of the cosmology here. This is all descended from a universal oneness, which I symbolize with O, then manifests in reality as G, God, which then splits out into uppercase I's and splits out into lowercase i's. And the form of this uppercase I is, again, kind of this spiritual filament, this spiritual fishing line that you can think of as kind of your spiritual DNA. It's the blueprint, kind of the fingerprint, the distinctive pattern that defines who you are as an uppercase I and distinguishes you from the field of all the other uppercase I's that are out there. My little pet theory on it is there's innumerable in a given universe as there are galaxies or maybe even stars in that universe. Anyway, that was a little tangent. So you've got the fishing line, the filament, and in its separation from oneness and its separation from God, it acquires certain tangles or crimpings, right? You've seen maybe a fishing line, when it gets unwound from a hook, it has these little crimps in it that you really struggle to get out. Or if you've had the unpleasant experience like of fishing in the wind, or fishing when you're not really paying attention, what inevitably happens to the fishing line, it gets tangled, it gets knotted up, it eventually can become almost like a bird's nest, right? Good luck picking that apart. Kind of a Gordian knot eventually. So anyway, this is the state of the spirit self. It has these crimps, these knots, these tangles in it. which hinder the flow of divine energy, divine information through it, creating these distinctive patterns of what I'll call either confusion or blindness or darkness. You could use an analogy here kind of with plumbing, right? If there's pipe work, and if the uppercase I is a network of pipes, these little crimps and tangles are kind of like clogs or pinchings in the pipe that are preventing the energy from moving through in an optimal way, preventing things from going through cleanly and clearly, to allow a more frictionless passage of information and divine energy through the filament, through the fishing line, through the piping. These are all just metaphors, of course. Okay, so then getting back then to my theory of why the uppercase I would go through the inherent difficulties of becoming a lowercase I, it's actually I think that framing actually puts it on its head. The reason life is difficult for a lowercase I is that when the uppercase I manifests in physical form, right, assumes the form of a body in time and space, it brings those tangles and crimps and all that knotting with it, and actually puts it into the body and into the life of the being. So in other words, I guess what I'm saying is the theory is that the reason life is difficult is that the spirit brings its difficulties into life seeking resolution for them. And what I hope this can do, again, to the extent you're going along with me on this, is to help you recognize how foolish fatalism is, right? Or cynicism. Fatalism and cynicism act like life is this external kind of grinding wheel, and we're this little grist that gets put into it, and the miseries and the drudgeries of life are just these circumstances beyond our poor little us and our control, and we just kind of got to weather it with as much grace as we can, and et cetera, et cetera. This then completely flips that and says, no, the field of beingness, right, that we call life is actually perfect and is love, and any sense of it being off is, again, us bringing these tangles and these knottings of ourselves from the spiritual dimension into a physical dimension, right? For the purpose of experiencing them more intimately, for the ultimate goal of healing and resolving them, right? So kind of getting back to the theory is the reason uppercase I assumes the form of lowercase I is to actually heal and resolve these crimps and knots and tangles inside of the spirit self. And the way it does it is it has experiences in life that create these disturbances that we feel in the body. So basically, the body then becomes kind of a map or a projection of that filament, of that pipe work, of that fishing line, gets projected into the body. And so let's say if the spirit, right, is like this, and the tangle in the spirit is here, then if I'm projecting it onto my body, I may be feeling it in the left part of my rib cage, right? Again, I'm taking some liberty here with the metaphors, but that's kind of the concept I'm getting, is that the spirit projects itself into physical form and then allows those same tangles and crimps in the spirit to manifest in the physical form, then giving the living, breathing being, right, the mammal body, the experience of feeling an inner pain or an inner disturbance. Now, the reason this is so messy is that when we incarnate into this world, we're not incarnating into some simple video game where everything's working in our favor. Oh God, I'm saying that. I'm realizing that actually is what's true, but work with me on kind of a sub-level for a second here. We incarnate into a world that is perfect, but has difficulties in it. And we bring those difficulties in. All right, I'm talking over myself a little bit here. Part of the difficulty we bring in is not just the tangling. We bring Mara, or evil, with us. And Mara, or evil, is what keeps us confused about why we're hurting. Keeps us looking in the wrong direction for the cause of our suffering, which basically, if you're looking anywhere outside yourself for the cause of your suffering, you're looking in the wrong direction, right? We all are. We all do it. I say this in a video. As soon as the video's over, I'm going to keep doing it. So we look in the wrong direction for the cause of our suffering, or if we're fortunate enough to realize that the cause of our suffering is actually this inner disturbance, which we brought in from pre-life, then what Mara does is pivots and essentially tries to get us to use unskillful means, or tries to take us off track on the skillful means of healing of it, which I talk about in the other video, is essentially bringing attentiveness with compassion, an open heart, equanimity, and non-attachment, essentially using that as almost kind of like a gentle massage, almost like a nice little jacuzzi that this energy can move through to finally get that relaxation it's looking for, and to finally reassume its more natural, open, and flowing form. So, we incarnate into life. Uppercase I into lowercase I. We're feeling these inner disturbances. Lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, we're confusing these inner disturbances for the effects of causes outside of ourselves. That person spoke in a certain tone to me. That's why I'm feeling this way. This president or presidential candidate is saying all this crazy ass shit. That's why I'm upset. That's why I'm on edge. That's why I'm feeling this lump or tightness in my throat. Okay, this video is getting a little longer than I thought, but as I talk about this, stuff keeps coming up. Okay, so one brief thing about this, and this is a series of videos all its own, but the nature of reality is not something that's coming at us, because what you might start to think of as I'm talking about this is like, well, Jesus Christ, dude, I was already trying to deal with the difficulty and complexities of my physical life and my physical environment, right? My job, my relationships with others, trying to get to places on time, trying to keep myself healthy, trying to keep myself financially solvent, all those things. And now you're telling me I've got all this inner stuff and pre-life stuff that I need to think of as well? What I want to do is I want to try to unify all of that, because I really believe it is all essentially one thing. We come into this field of being from uppercase I to lowercase I, right? We've got our tangles and our knottings. We've got our Mara, or our confusion, with us, which, little side note, I think is actually kind of a trainer. I call it the dark sensei. It's teaching us, I think this is all kind of a God school, and it's teaching us how to be God. And what God has is the inability to be offended. And what this thing will teach you through hard knocks and God knows how many freaking lifetimes is how not to be offended. And I can only aspire to being there myself. Anyway, you come into life. You got your bar, you got your tangles. What life is, right? What the world and the environment, all those things I described, right? All those quote-unquote difficulties or problems, it's actually kind of you could think of it like a holographic projection of your tangle. So, for example, if, I'll reveal my political bias here. I'm generally left-leaning and liberal. So Donald Trump just agitates me to no end. And what's crazy about it is I never met Donald Trump. Donald Trump has no idea who I am, and being Donald Trump, he probably wouldn't give a shit if he met me. But I've personalized this thing with him. I've created this inner rivalry with him. And just the sight of him, or people mentioning his name, or I see a Trump bumper sticker, and I just get angry, I get tight. This is my spirit, right, incarnated in the world, with some hang-up, some tangle in itself. And it's projecting that tangle out onto Trump. And it's giving me a choice. Either I can keep playing the fool's game, which is to get angry at him, to blame it on him, to start pouring my attention and my intention and my imagination into thoughts about him, all of which takes all that away from me and my ability to heal, right? And now what I've done is just got caught up in the drama of life. I've taken the tangle of my spirit and poured it into external drama of life, which will do the opposite of heal me. All that'll do is actually tangle things worse up in my body. You see people who carry around grudges, what happens to them over time, right? They become stiff, they become hunched, they become bitter, sometimes they'll even shake, right? It's all this accumulated negative energy, all this judgment energy that's just passing through and clogging them up because it's misdirected, right? And Mara is just snickering the entire time, saying, here goes that fool again, right? Came into this life to resolve his own issues, right? To resolve his own hang-ups. And now he's spending his life getting angry at external stuff, which he himself is creating almost like a little glimmer, right? So what is Donald Trump really in my life? To me, in my life, Donald Trump is a little glimmer or a wink from God reminding you, hey, Joe, you've got unresolved stuff inside of you, bro. Go inside, right? Harmonize your energy field and allow this to uncoil. Allow this to untangle. It ain't about Trump. How could it be about Trump, right? That's ridiculous. That's absurd. And yet the mind will tell all these stories about why it must be about him, right? Mara at work. Okay, so it seems like that the game is, right, called the game, the skillful practice, is to recognize that any external quote-unquote trigger, what it's doing is it's actually alerting your attention to the tangle. And it puts you at a choice point, a fork in the road. Externalize it and lose yourself in the drama in the game once again, or recognize its inherently internal nature, right? It's deep withinness, right? Which if you're really attentive, you'll say, it's not only just within my body, it's within the spirit from which my body derives. And that can actually take a little pressure off. Sometimes, you're a freaking human being, you've been on this earth only so long, you've been working hard, and you're like, Jesus Christ, all these little winks from the universe to resolve this stuff. Remember, it's your legacy, it's your inheritance. You didn't create all of it. It was actually created for you for the purpose of letting you resolve it, and in the process do that God school, get those skills going. Okay, so you get the little glimmer, right? The little wink from God, right? In the form of whatever. Donald Trump, someone cutting you off in traffic, someone speaking to you in that tone that you just can't stand. Do you externalize it or do you internalize it? Okay, when you internalize it, right? There's choice number one that's wise, right? Internalize it. Recognize, it's not about that topic at all. If you can kind of see that topic as like the seed, as the shell on the sunflower seed, right? Pop it off, respectfully spit it out, and you deal with the seed, right? The seed is what you brought into this life. Now, what do you do with it, right? So here's another fork in the road, and Mara is on your shoulder the entire way through this process. Now that you've recognized that this is inherently internal in nature, you're then going to get to a fork in the road. Do I treat it as a problem, or do I treat it as an opportunity, right? Treating it as a problem is treating it like it's some wart that needs to be burned off. Treating it like some tapeworm that needs to be extracted from you, right? Some parasite that needs to be removed. The way you'll be able to tell whether you're using this is you'll have a negative framing, a scarcity framing, a victim framing, right? Something along those lines. The more skillful way is to recognize that it's an opportunity, right? And if you're able to keep that situational awareness of, this is internal, not external. It's from my spirit, right? It's not something that I as a human being created in this lifetime, although I do want to come back to that. This is actually my legacy and my opportunity. And it's no accident that I'm here dealing with this right now. It's actually for my benefit, right? It's going to help uppercase I to resolve this tangle, right? To have more flow. It's going to help lowercase I in this life because I'm going to start resolving some of this built up energy. And then it's also going to help kind of uppercase I up into G, into God, because I'm doing God work. What is God work? Compassionately resolving suffering with no external agenda, right? Unconditional loving awareness, right? That's God work, right? That's God work. And so that's what this second fork in the road is trying to train us to do, right? We've seen the first fork in the road. It's not external, it's internal. We're now at the second fork of the road. It's not a burden, it's an opportunity, right? And then at the third fork in the road, we say, well, what do we do with this opportunity? And this is again where Mara comes in. This is where we can either be the hero, right? Or we can be the healer. The hero will say, right? We'll start telling great stories about himself, him or herself. Look at me, I've seen the first two forks in the road, I've spotted it, I'm wise, right? This is Mara talking again. This is Mara whispering in our ear, trying to get us back into a drama game, get us back into an ego game. The wiser practitioner does the work of healing, which is to zero out as much of the storytelling as we can and instead try to cultivate that field, right? That harmonized field of beingness, right? That field of unconditional loving awareness, right? What are the qualities of it? Attentiveness, equanimity, compassion, non-clinging, non-attachment. Now, in the other video, I went into that in more detail, so I'll try not to repeat myself here, but let me go back to one thing I tagged earlier. So, and this is a difficult topic because it gets into an area that, if I'm being honest, I would have a difficult time saying this looking eye to eye with someone who's suffered significant physical or interpersonal trauma. And that's not because I don't think it's true. I do believe it's true, but just on a human-to-human level, this is something that can be very difficult for someone to embrace and accept if they themselves have been the victim of something serious. And honestly, it can be kind of cruel and callous to confront someone with this if they've been in that situation. And so If in any way this hurts you, I sincerely apologize. That's not my intention. And if you have been victimized and you're feeling sensitive, you may not want to listen to this part because it may not make you feel good. Basically, the concept is, an uppercase I incarnates as lowercase I, bringing those tangles and knots from the spirit self into the physical self. What it will do is, in that life, it will actually create scenarios to reintroduce on a physical level the traumas that exist on the spirit level. What do I mean by that? So let's imagine there's a tangle, and I'm just going to call it a slip knot just to give it a shape, okay? So this tangle in the spirit fishing line is a slip knot. When we come into this physical body, I believe it will bake some of these knots in. But then what the spirit will also do is it will use its creative power, right? Because the spirit is constantly creating life in the world. And our spirits, right? I'm here on the I-5 freeway right now. There's thousands of cars all around me. I believe that every single driver, every single one of us in these cars, our spirit selves are co-creating the experience of being on the I-5 freeway together among all the other things that we can experience. And what I as an individual spirit create are circumstances in life that introduce into my physical body the slip knot that I have in my spirit self, so that is then in my presence, in my field of awareness, right? Giving me those forks in the road, the opportunities to either deal with it or not deal with it. And so, for example, if we have a particularly difficult, I was going to call it nasty, but on the spirit level, let me just try and call it difficult, slip knot. We may incarnate in this life and submit ourselves to an atrocity, right? And I won't even start naming them, but you can imagine what they might be, right? Things that feel like they almost tear the fabric of who we are. And you actually see in some people that it does tear into the fabric of who they are. And this is the sheer wildness of life for me, manifest, is that we do that to ourselves. And let me just be very clear about this. I'm not saying that the person with a name, right, Joseph Clark, I'm not saying that Joseph Clark consciously created those circumstances in life to traumatize myself to heal my spirit. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the spirit self, right, in co-creation with God, whole nother video, the spirit self creates that circumstance, right, that horror, that atrocity, right, that seemingly unforgivable act that another does to us or that we perhaps do to ourselves, to recreate that slip knot, right, or that double knot, or I wish I knew more knots, I could give more examples, but do you see where I'm kind of going with this? It will create that scenario to create the infliction of injury in the body that then creates the pattern that mirrors the pattern in the spirit, which then creates the potential, right, for all those forks in the road, right? And that to me is just, in the midst of deep suffering, it seems like a cruel arrangement. From a certain degree of, not remove, but zoomed out perspective, if what we see it as is actually the co-creation with God for the purpose of resolving the tangles of our spirit, and then for the additional deeper purpose of giving us as experiencers, right, us as operators, the deep practice of becoming God, of becoming unconditional loving awareness, right? Because that, I believe, is ultimately our legacy, right? We start as one, manifest as God, manifest into uppercase I, manifest into lowercase I. There's kind of this going out, right? This diaspora of the oneness, right? And eventually it's all going to return, right? You might think of it kind of like the Big Bang erupting out, and then eventually the heat collapse of the universe back into a single point. We're moving through a black hole. It's kind of like that, I believe. And if you look at it on that scale, what I think you see is this traumatizing, these tanglings of the uppercase I are what allow for the diasporas, what allows the I to no longer identify as one or as God, but as something that's more complicated, something that's more complex, something that's more messy, which I think deep down is how we all feel. And then on this deep level, and I'm talking even outside of time, but in time, manifesting in eons and eons of beingness, is how we then undo that dispersion into a recollection, a reconflation into one. And the way we do it is we reharmonize, right? It's not like a journey in the sense that we have to cross some distance. What we need to do is untangle ourselves, right? Undo this knotting and this crimping so that the energy of divine energy can flow through our beingness, right? Kind of like an instrument. Imagine like a trombone or something that's crimped or dented at certain points. It's not going to make that pure note, right? It allows us to then have the energy move through us, make that purer note, which then reharmonizes us with oneness, which we never leave oneness, right? We're always there. It's just that when we're crimped and cramped and stuff and kind of caught up in our own mess, we spend time inside of this seemingly private experience. And the undoing of that, right, this quote-unquote return journey home is really just about undoing the tanglings, which then allows the energy to flow through us, allows our note to be pure and more harmonized. And it's simply that energy, that musical note that we produce in the spirit realm. Once that note comes back to the God or the one note, then you are God and one again, right? It's as simple as that. And yet I say simple, it is so far from easy. I mean, look, even in the span of a single life, the difficulties we go through trying to resolve these tangles and crimps within us. And I just want to kind of pull one example from maybe, I recognize a lot of what I'm saying here. You can either call it abstruse or, some people might say it's kind of crazy, abstract, spiritual, it requires leaps of faith. Think about something that you hear a lot and you may have experienced yourself. And it's that we and others, we seem to recreate throughout our lives some similar scenarios, right? So for example, we might be the child of an abusive person, and let's not even just broad brush it that way. We may be the child of a person who's abusive in a certain way. And how often do you see, and it's so much easier to see in others than to see in ourselves, right? But I'll use others for that sake. How often do you see others, right? And when you're friends, it's excruciating to see that they just keep recreating the same patterns, right? They will then marry someone who mirrors the abuser they experienced as a child, or they will themselves treat themselves that way, kind of create an inner self, an inner critic that abuses them from within. Or if they were spoiled, right, they'll stay with someone who spoils them. And we tell a human story about this, right, which is that, well, they don't know any different, right? They don't know any better, right? Or they think they deserve it. And on a certain emotional level, I think that's true. But I think that looking at that in isolation can be kind of misleading because it makes it seem like it's the fault of the human being who's going through the experience. It's not. There's really no fault in the process at all. But if you're going to assign a cause to it, the cause is the spirit with its crimping and its knotting, right, coming into life. And what I think is happening when you see the recurring pattern in a person, right, they had it happen in childhood, they're now doing it again as an adult, is it's the spirit creating in life these scenarios where it keeps trying to put you at the forks in the road. It keeps trying to put you at these choice points where you get to choose, do I see this as the cause is external or internal, right? Do I see it as a burden or an opportunity? Do I see myself as a hero or a healer, right? And if during our life we don't take the more skillful forks in the road, right, or don't even recognize that to begin with, then we won't resolve the tangle in the body, which means we aren't resolving the tangle in the spirit. And so the spirit, right, the tangle, will just keep recreating the scenarios to try to allow the experiencing self the opportunity to deal with it. And this kind of touches on a common thing we as human beings ask, which is, how could a God that's all-powerful, and especially a God that we conceive of as all-loving, subject us to these miseries, especially these repetitive miseries, these recurrent miseries, that it's not that people don't try to deal with them, right? People will try to deal with them in all kinds of ways. Therapy, talking to friends, crying, using drugs, using medicines, using all kinds of things. And what I think it starts to point to is that it's really, it's that from our incarnated perspective, we see things in the span of a lifetime. And we expect everything to open and close in the course of a life. Everything, all storylines to reach their introduction their rising action, their conflict, and their resolution, all within a life. We expect all the doggies to come home, all within the course of a lifetime, not appreciating that we are actually multi-lifetime beings that use each lifetime in a unique way to experience, to train, to grow, and to entangle as much as untangles in that life. And what I think is tricky is the ego will treat us as, hey, well, you're supposed to fix the problems in my life, right? You are supposed to resolve all my problems. I shouldn't still be feeling pain. I shouldn't still be feeling regret. I shouldn't still be committing the same cognitive error. I shouldn't still be abusing people in the same way, abusing myself in the same way. And we think, okay, well, how many years do I have left to do this? What have I tried? What do I have left to do? Right? And we just keep getting caught up in the same limited set of practices and the same limited mindset, this one lifetime mindset. Which again, being mammals, it's very hard not to have that mindset, right? It's kind of the rare bird who's able to get out of that framework and look at things from a larger perspective. And the rare bird still, right, and this is where I kind of see the divide of where I'm at right now. I have these frameworks and I buy into them, but I would not say it's yet the dominant theme of my beingness. The dominant theme of my beingness is still that one lifetime perspective and still that kind of pride, shame, vanity thing of, hey, I am my keeper, I am my protector, I'm going to fix everything, don't worry, just give me time, I'm working on it, I got it, and by the time we die, don't worry, everything will be good, right? That's kind of the story I tell myself, which is foolish and understandable. I think a wiser and kinder perspective to ourselves, and one that's more aligned with reality, as I see it, would be to say, look, I'm a lowercase I. I'm also an uppercase I, I'm also God, I'm also oneness. These hang-ups I'm having, especially these recurring issues, these things that keep coming up, these pet peeves, right? These things that I just keep getting upset about, can't seem to shake. These are invitations to heal. They're not obligations. There's no urgency in it. In fact, treating it as obligatory or treating it with urgency deharmonizes my field, introduces negativity and scarcity into my field, and actually acts against my efforts to heal. These inner arisings, right, like a bubble going through the neck of a bottle, they arise. They're opportunities for me to heal. Opportunities for me to heal my physical body for this life. Opportunities to heal the uppercase I. Opportunities to train as a G, right? Kind of like that, train as a G. And then an opportunity then training as a G is to hit that G note and re-become one. Okay, I gotta get over fear. I'm gonna get over to the 5. Pardon me for a second. So if you treat it more with that perspective, which again, a lot easier said than done, and you can say it a lot of times, and I think it just takes a while for the meat and the bones to really buy into it. But this is what I think a lot of the deep practitioners, the deep wise practitioners eventually are able to do. And I'm not saying they embed it within my cosmology by any means, but just more that they have a certain perspective on it that takes a lot of the pressure and the heat and candidly kind of the ego and the pride out of the operating self and kind of puts it back into a place that's more aligned with what is, which is, hey, you've got your share to deal with, and you'll deal with it as well as you do. If you're fortunate, right, and by the grace of God, if you're able to have a harmonized field, and that when these disturbances arise, instead of externalizing them, instead of seeing them as a burden, or instead of seeing yourself as a hero or a villain, right, you see it as an internal thing. That's an opportunity. You see yourself more as a healer, right, almost as kind of an inner redeemer. And that's how these things resolve in the body. And that's how things then resolve in the spirit. That's how we train as God. And that's how we, I say, make our way back to the home, but we've really never left, right? It's instead how we become that straightened out, hammered out trombone. That's how we become that pipe work that can now channel the energy through, that instrument capable of producing the pure note. And as soon as we're harmonizing at that note, where we actually don't return, we realize where we've been the whole time, which is in oneness, in our place of essence. And my Lord, how many lifetimes do we, I want to say endure, but that's not the right word. How many lifetimes do we experience in this sacred process, this process of the diaspora of our one beingness into so many individual lives, and then gradually pulling that spirit energy back out of all those lives through the spirits, through God, back to one, in this process of crimping, tangling, knotting, right? That's how we get out. Uncrimping, untangling, unknotting, harmonizing, how we come back in. A journey with no movement, the soundtrack of which becomes increasingly cacophonous and then increasingly harmonious. Right? Clanging, shrieking. No offense, Yoko Ono, but kind of that. Back to something that's a little more of a Beethoven and a Mozart vibe. And maybe I'll just end on this. I know I've been going on for a while now and took a series of side roads along the way. But there's something about music that hits us so deeply. I mean, you could be really kind of in whatever mood, you could be in whatever mindset, but if the right piece of music comes to your ears, there's an effect that almost kind of blows through all the walls and the armoring and all the things we put up and hits on something deep inside of us. And I guess what I want you to take away from this is recognize that that's that note or that song or that instrument inside of you. Maybe think of it, Rumi talked about the reed flute, right? That vibrating reed, right? Which was one day in a riverbed or in a field. It was plucked, it was dried, it was treated, it was inserted in the wind instrument. And when the player blows the vibration of his vocal air through the instrument, it vibrates the reed, which then creates the note, right? The note in the air. So vibration of body to vibration of reed to vibration of air, vibration of medium. And it works, I think, similarly with us. When we hear music, the reed in us vibrates with the vibration of that beautiful music on the outside and touches us deeply. And let that just remind you, right? That depth that you can be touched by music is that depth that is beyond the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, right? It is the depth that is beyond the suffering of life. And what people call spiritual bypass is essentially a retreat toward that space to try to escape or dodge or skirt around the difficulties of life. And, spiritual bypass, like everything, is A, perfect as it occurs, and B, foolish, because who do you think you're kidding? Who do you think you're getting around? The only way back is through. And I think what the wiser practitioner does is not try to escape to that place of deep quietude and inner music. Take refuge there, of course, when it feels like it's too much, but always, always, always look for the opportunity to re-engage, to refill the density of your beingness, refill the meat and the marrow of your life, and experience what's going on there. And when you feel that reed deep within you, right, vibrating, either with the music that's inspiring you from outside life, or even sweeter, from the music that's coming within, use it as a little glimmer, a little reminder that within us is something that is not touched, and is not hurt, and is not quote-unquote corrupted or corruptible in life. And it's that oneness, that godness, that pure love that is always in the space where it starts and ends. And you, experiencer, we, voyager, we, trekker, we out on the ship of life, dealing with the storms, dealing with the struggles, dealing with the hungers and the diseases and the pains and the agonies, oh Jesus, and the terror of the mirror mind sometimes. We're it too. We never stop being it. And we're doing this for a purpose that is irreducible. We're doing this as a gift to ourselves in a way that you really can't reduce or summarize. And it's not anything other than love. It never stops being that. And the mind will not believe that. The mind will throw up all these objections, indignation, outrage, It'll be offended by that notion. It'll parade all these atrocities and examples in front of us to say that's not true. And again, what does the wise practitioner do? Don't pull out your sword and try to cut those down. Go inside. Find your reed. See if you can bring it to sing, or see if you can bring something in your life to help it sing. And remember that you are not just the experiencer, right? You are not just the brave traveler, the warrior of life. You're also that reed. And that reed is always with you. And even when you can't feel it, and even when you can't hear it singing, it's there, deep within. And it's a common reed deep within all of us, is that O or that G, right? That ultimate reed. And then you have your own personal reed. Unlike anyone else's reed in the entire universe is your uppercase I, right? And this is why, people talk about how our flaws are our perfection. Your flaws, quote unquote, right? Your crimping, your tangling, right? The distinctive patterns of unflowingness in your beingness is what gives your reed its distinctive notes, is why you manifest in distinctive ways, unlike any other does, right? And so see your beingness and see your legacy as this irreducible combination of the ultimate unified reed that we all are, right? And the special reed that you are. And the next time you feel a disturbance arise in your body, give thanks. Give thanks. Be grateful. Give thanks. You're creating this for yourself. Give thanks. God is creating this for you. Give thanks. Oneness, the one we all are, is creating this for you. Give thanks. Your mind is objecting. Your mind says that's nonsense. That's bull. Give thanks. Give thanks. Because if you were in a position of omnipotence, right, of omniscience, of omni-lovingness, right, if you knew everything, had complete control, and had the biggest, most compassionate heart you can imagine, you wouldn't change a thing about what's happening. Not one smidge. How do you know? Because you do have that in oneness. In oneness, you are omniscient. You are omnipotent, and you are omni-loving, and you are creating this exactly the way it is, right? Don't be a hero and try to tell yourself a story about it or connect the dots, right? I do that all the time. It's a trap, right? Open your heart. Invite your reed to sing. Invite those tangles to unknot. Don't get attached to whether they do or don't this particular time around. Give thanks for this opportunity to practice. Practice being God. Practice being unconditional loving. Practice being more aware, more attentive, more compassionate, right? More equanimous. Did I say that right? Equanimous, equanimitable. Right? Have more non-attachment. Because that's what you're here to do. Not under any burden or obligation. It's just an invitation. It's an opportunity. It's an encouragement, utterly uninsistent. Give thanks. And in that spirit of gratitude, right? I was reading in Lion's Roar that the practitioners of Shin Buddhism, right? Their practice, their primary practice is practicing gratitude. And it's sometimes easy for us to kind of write that off as kind of a kumbaya, almost kind of like trying to beat a drum of positivity or self-affirmation. And of course it can be done that way. But God, there's a deep wisdom and intelligence in doing that. Because if everything really is unfolding for our benefit, unfolding exactly as it should be in our benefit, and the only real difference between it being something that goes productively in that sense of resolving things, or goes unproductively in the sense of unresolving things or adding more irresolution to things, if the only difference is the attitude we have in those moments when we're experiencing that, and if the attitude of gratitude, excuse me, is what harmonizes you more closely to the truth, because, I've been rambling now for 45 minutes. You don't got time to do that every time something rises up, right? Sometimes we need something, a mnemonic or something, kind of a quicker path. And gratitude bakes so much of this into it, right? Because there's a humbling. You say, I don't trust my mind right now to situate me into what's happening. Because my mind's just going to externalize it. My mind's going to say it's about this, or it's about that, or it's my fault, right? And that's the nature of the mind. Gratitude, what a beautiful shortcut to a harmonic note. A beautiful shortcut to a harmonized field. I'm calling it a shortcut. It's only that perspective from the mind that sees it that way, right? What a beautiful note to play for yourself, right? What a beautiful attitude to invoke. Gratitude. It doesn't have to be gratitude about anything, gratitude toward anything. The purest gratitude is that dervish gratitude, right? Gratitude for being, and gratitude for being, and gratitude for being. And that's a gift you give yourself, because that kind of slow vortexing of gratitude creates a natural harmonization of the field, which allows those tangles in the body, right, the tangles of lifetime drama to resolve, which then resolves them in spirit. And think about that act of gratitude you're doing is your God practice, right, which is the deeper level of why you incarnated from God into an I, to get that practice once again of being unconditionally loving. So make it as unconditional as you can, right? Gratitude. Not gratitude for something. It's thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Be kind to yourself. Try not to evaluate the quality of your gratitude. And if you do, be kind to yourself. Give thanks and be grateful. Make gratitude the dance that you're always willing to rejoin, right? The tune you're always willing to start humming again. Do it as a gift to yourself. Because whether what I'm saying is closer to the truth or what someone else has as a picture is closer to the truth, when you practice this and when you look at people who truly have found happiness in life, that truly unconditional or inner-derived happiness, they have a spirit of gratitude. And I really don't believe the gratitude came after everything started being better. I think gratitude is really, more than anything, the means, right? Kind of the vessel, the way of getting from this state of feeling victimized and caught up in the ups and downs of life and getting into a state where you really see life more as the true gift and opportunity that it is.